And Putin has said, we very much welcome other nations to join us in developing this and exploiting these resources. So explicitly, the United States is welcome. And so that's, 10, 12 trillion worth of Ukraine's resources, plus 75 to 90 trillion of Russian resources. And then, the United States also doesn't have to shoulder the cost of providing security for all this. And so it's an offer with much greater upside for the United States and virtually no downside. Whereas being the security guarantor for Zelensky's government has a massive downside risk, meaning, the United States would have to provide the troops and the weaponry and the treasure to upkeep the Ukraine's government, at risk of ending up in a war against Russia in the part of the world where Russia has the escalatory dominance. Even this was clear even to Barack Obama in 2014, which is why he declined to escalate the conflict back then. And so from that point of view, the choice for the United States is crystal clear, but it's not something that you can just lay out publicly and say, this is why we're doing it. It all has to be wrapped in human rights, humanitarian issues, peace, law and order, international, all those nice things. And so I think that the Trump administration is very carefully maneuvering their way out, while at the same time discussing cooperation with Russia on future things, on future projects, on economic development, on trade. And they, they give it away because they say we're discussing bigger issues than just Ukraine. That there will have to be a period of maybe a national unity government, and then, the new elections. The Russians will exert pressure to bring all of the, war criminals to justice. So there will be a continuing purge of the neo-Nazi element from Ukraine. And I think that in this way, without having to fight a war, Russia will be able to reassert itself and draw Ukraine back into its orbit and have a government in Kiev that will realign with Russia and loosen its ties to the West. And so in that sense, Russia gains control over all of Ukraine again. Well, Giorgia Meloni is very close to the Trump administration. She's very close with the certain U.S. interests which seem to be opposed to Europe, to the European Union and to Britain. This is all, happening under the radar. It's not overt. It's not out in the open, but it's very, very real. And I think that we will know. It'll take time for the dust to settle and for things to become more apparent. Right now, it's very, very difficult to judge. Again, part of the reason is that, there's a lot of entrenched thinking. People on both sides of the Atlantic have grown up with the ideas of these traditional alliances between the United States and European powers, the special relationship between the Britain and the United States and all this. But I think that in actual fact, the relations are borderline hostile now. And if you read British press, every so often you will see hints dropped that the United States is now the enemy. And then, not the Europeans in the sense of European nations, but the European Union is very afraid of Trump, and they are on the Western powers. It's always coming from London unless it's coming through its satellite Brussels. They have pushed Croatia into an alliance, into a military alliance with Albania, Kosovo, and Bulgaria. And I'm not sure if Bulgaria is really a part of it. People are saying, no, 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 no. They're denying it, even though it's been officially announced. This is the east, the south, and the west of Serbia. This is obviously aimed at Serbia. But there is zero appetite for this kind of a conflict in Bulgaria, and there's zero appetite for this kind of a conflict from Croatia. So we're talking basically about Kosovo and Albania, and I suspect that Albania is not too much on board with that either, because Kosovo is a NATO-controlled enclave, a U.S.-controlled enclave, but again, the United States is rapidly losing interest. It used to be, it still is a training ground for jihadis that then get fielded around to Syria and elsewhere to wage war on behalf of the empire. And now there's fear that the Serbs will retake Kosovo, and that the Kosovo will have to defend itself by force of arms at some point. And then at the same time, the Serbs have refused to sanction Russia. They have good open cooperation with Russia. And so attacking Serbia would be, again, like in World War I, a way to draw Russia into another quagmire, this time in the Balkans. And in World War I, they used Serbia to provoke Austrian Empire into attacking Serbia, waging war, and then it all blew up because Russia had to come to the aid of Serbs. They didn't come to Serbia, but they kind of declared war on Germany because Germany was deemed as responsible for the behavior of Vienna. And so now it seems to me that the Brits are trying to revamp the same playbook to draw Russia into the Balkans, to defend Kosovo as their beachhead in the Balkans, and to prevent Serbia from taking it over. But I don't know that it's going to work, because it's, Serbia, Croatia, even though we were at war against the Serbs 30 years ago, we actually have a lot of reasons to have a positive, constructive cooperation with Serbia. We were part of the same country once. We had our disagreements, but we speak the same language. We are Christian nations on both sides. On the other hand, Croatians have very little in common with Kosovo or with Albania. We are completely different peoples. We don't speak the same language. They're Muslims, we're Catholic. Dragging us into this alliance is something that's almost against nature. Not to mention that it's territorially not even contiguous. These are territorial fragments that are not even connected. So it's the whole plan, I think, is completely idiotic. 100 years ago, Hungary was a major European power. Croatia is not a major European power. It's like the whole thing, it's the same geography, but the circumstances have changed so much that I think that it just reflects the desperation of the empire to do another arson attack against peace in the world. But I don't see it as gaining very much traction. In Croatia, in fact, people are kind of thinking like, what is this? What kind of an alliance is this? What does this have to do with us? And it's almost like it drifted into oblivion, because people just kind of dismissed it. Like, whatever, this is nothing, never mind. And so I think that nothing comes of it. I think that the Balkans is going to be very difficult to set alight again. It's not impossible, but it's going to be difficult. I think that people are seeing through the British role in Bosnia and against Serbia, and I think that they're not inclined to play into it. It's always the same playbook, Nima. It's the same playbook, and now Pakistan against India again. and it's just like one thing after another. This has been the 200-year architecture of insecurity in the world, deliberately set up, deliberately fomented by the British Empire and its reincarnation with the U.S. NATO empire. But it now faces real opposition in this world, and I think that real opposition is not only in command of the bulk of global GDP, it's also a credible economic, military, and diplomatic power in this world. And I think that more and more nations are realizing the sun is starting to rise from the east. They make sure that there is no effective communication between the two sides. Like now, they're desperate to break the new new entente cordiale between Russia and the United States. They want to keep them on hostile terms. So the same was done between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and now there's no need. There's no more need for that, and there's a lot to gain from constructive cooperation. And now everybody sees that. And then Russia signed a comprehensive cooperation agreement with Iran. China signed a comprehensive cooperation agreement with Iran. They're holding annual naval exercises every year in the Indian Ocean. They intended to draw them in order to behead them. But it's true that the United States has lost a lot of industry at the expense of China, and now they want to reverse this. They want to rebalance this and bring back manufacturing to the United States. But this will have to be sorted out between the United States and China in bilateral trade talks, and they will have to be signing comprehensive bilateral cooperation agreements, as the Chinese did with the Russians, as they did with the Iranians. And there's a lot of complementarity between the Chinese economy and the American economy. The American economy still has a certain dynamism that will allow it to spring back. When you start to allocate credit not into housing bubbles and real estate bubbles and spending trillions on the military industrial complex and bases and keeping upkeeping the NATO and so forth, the United States will be able to allocate a lot of capital into its main industries. And let's say that they need to keep the beachhead, keep the place that they can use again in the future to destabilize Russia in whatever way that they can. Well, Zelensky does have a substantial role. The only problem is that Zelensky doesn't have sovereignty in Ukraine. He's a puppet, and he's a puppet of external forces. And I think that the most essential aspect of this war obviously is economic. It's not, I don't know if there's anybody left that still believes that this has anything to do with freedom and democracy. This is clearly about resources, Ukraine's resources, but more so Russia's resources, and using the hegemony over Central and Eastern Europe to defend the hegemony over the Eurasian landmass. That has been the game of the empire for the last 2 centuries. And the United States has been a major part of this. And there are many vested interests in the United States that are still committed to this, that would still want to see Zelensky's regime succeed, retain power, defeat Russia, and they don't defeat Russia and Ukraine, force them to withdraw. Because let's say French and British troops land in Odessa. I guarantee you there will be many people in Odessa who will provide the exact location of where these troops are to the Russians, who will visit with Mr. Kinjal or something like that. So it's going to be a political struggle for control of Ukraine. But if the Russians succeed to get the Americans on their side, then I think they no longer need to do it. Well, if you're sitting on the other side of that, then the one thing you don't want to give the Israelis is external enemy that would cause them to close rank behind Netanyahu's government. Because once there's an external enemy, an external threat, then all these internal infighting dies down, because you have to go and defend the nation. So I think that maybe that's part of the reason why so many forces in the region are standing back. Iran still never replied for Israel's last attack, because maybe they judge that it's better to let Israel just fall under the weight of its own internal problems. As far as the mainstream media in the West is concerned, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. It's a guarantor of stability in the Middle East. It has the right to defend itself, and that's about it. That's about all they say. In Israel itself, I think the debate is a lot more lively, but it's also becoming. I think that the reason that this, and so if I were Israeli, if I were a Zionist, I would be very, very distrustful of the Trump administration, regardless of what is being said out in the open. Now, I think that there are these for the region, for the UAE, Oman, Saudi Arabia. I think they all see the writing on the wall. They all see that the situation is unsustainable. They all see that if they yield to Israel and to the Western Empire, that they'll be next. This is no security architecture. This is a permanent insecurity architecture. And up until 10 years ago, I don't know, on my clock it's 2015 when Russia intervened on the side of Syria in the Middle East, that things begin to change, and the powers in the region realize that there is an alternative. We're going to impose sanction. We're going to freeze your assets, and then that's it. And so they realize that they need something else, that they need to protect themselves by making nice with Iran, with China, with Russia, and so start to distance themselves away from the Western Empire. But the same is going on in the United States. And I think that the tide is really turning. And this is why we see now that the main arsonist of peace in the world, which is the United Kingdom, is starting to destabilize more and more and more regions. I got a report from Bosnia that the president of the Serbian canton, Milorad Dodik, is going around with very heavy security, and he's saying publicly that the British are trying to assassinate him, specifically the British. And pretty much everybody in Bosnia accepts that the British are ruling the land, and that the place is crawling with British. Well, I wonder if he got any satellite pictures from Gaza or from Rafah. Then he would see something much, much worse. But okay. Look, I think that the situation in Ukraine is a mess, obviously, but it's winding down to a close. At least the active warfighting part is drawing to a close. And I think that Zelensky regime is going to fall. It's a matter of time. I don't quite understand. Well, maybe I do understand, but I think it's very strange that Zelensky is being as abrasive and as confrontational with Trump and his government when they are the only force in the world, the only military force in the world that can save his regime. I think it's very indicative that Zelensky's loyalties lie with some other force in the world. I think that's the City of London, and that he's very frustrated with the fact that he is no longer getting the unquestioning blank checks from the United States, unlimited supplies of arms and money, and so forth. And so he's responding very impulsively, and I think that his policies are crafted in London, and he's doing as they tell him. And London has its own interests with respect to Ukraine, which are their interests, not the American interest, not the Western interest, not the European interest. And they are obviously trying to find ways to keep the United States committed to a Western-aligned regime in Ukraine, whether Zelensky or whoever might come after him. But the whole name of the game is keeping control of Kiev. And I think that part of the terms of the armistice will be probably 100% complete withdrawal of all Ukraine's forces from all four regions. So when they say we're going to freeze the front line, I think that what they're saying is we can stop fighting at these lines, but in the peace agreement, you will agree to completely withdraw your troops from all four regions that are now officially part of Russia, as far as the Russians are concerned. But I think more importantly than the buffer zone, because what buffer zone is a geographic concept. I think that they need to prevent Western powers, particularly Great Britain, from controlling the government in Kiev, controlling the ports, because if they have control of the ports, they will continue to use it to bring in weaponry, to ship in troops, to effect an opium war against Russia, because they will try to use it to smuggle drugs into Russia. You know, opium war has been one of the main tools of foreign policy of Great Britain for 200 years now, and you know that can greatly destabilize any nation, and it's a problem for Russia, because Ukrainians are, you know, largely Russian speakers. Many of them have family in Russia, so you can't prevent the people from going in and out. So there's always going to be Russia will always be a soft target if somebody has political control of the government in Kiev. So they will always have this vulnerability to being destabilized from Ukraine, unless they have control over their government and their you know, their system of law and order. And then, you know, let's not forget, the United States has had, I don't know, maybe they still have, a number of biolabs in Ukraine close to the Russian borders. According to the Pentagon themselves, Victoria Nuland conceded that they had 46 or 48, I forget the exact number, but there are many. So there's also the vulnerability to biological attacks in the future. So I think that there's no question that whether militarily or administratively, Russia has to take full control of Ukraine. And, you know, with the United States on their side, they might not need anymore to fight it out by force. It could be a political process. I think that Ukraine is crawling with Russian spies and Russian assets. I think that will continue to make it very, very difficult for the Western. And then there's the thing of Denmark, which, you know, will come to a breaking point over Greenland at some point. I think that the United States has now explicitly embraced multipolar integrations, which means that the current administration sees their future as part of the multipolar world, which means that they have to make nice with Russia, with China. I think that the tariff war is a wrecking ball to dismantle the current system of free trade and force a renegotiation of trade relations on a bilateral basis, with China, with Russia, with other countries, in a way that's different from the British free trade system enshrined under the WTO. But I think that in fullness of time, that's going to be the future. Of course, this is the United States shifting from the British free trade system to the American system of political economy, which is, the difference is that British free trade system is allocating credit to speculative activities, not to productive industry, and then running these boom-bust sequences, inflating financial bubbles, speculation, bursting the bubbles, obtaining massive bailouts for the too big to fail banks, rinse, repeat, all over and over and over again, where the nation, the population, the industries, the small and medium-sized enterprise always loses, and the bankers always walk away with the loot with complete impunity. The American system of political economy is more centered around a state-controlled bank that issues credit for productive uses, meaning infrastructure projects, reindustrialization, reviving of the small and medium-sized businesses. Well, so far as Trump administration is concerned, it would appear that they are ardent Zionists, that they are all completely and totally committed to Israel, that they are an Israel-first administration. But that is completely inconsistent with them embracing the multipolar integrations, because Israel has been the project of Western Empire. It was created by the British Empire. It was created there as a beachhead to keep the region destabilized in order to defend Western hegemony over the Middle Eastern region, in order to be able to extract its resources and keep control. That means that you have to be policing the region. You have to be supporting Israel militarily. You have to defend Israel no matter how complicated, how expensive it gets, because it's the bankers' access to the collateral of the Middle East, so that it's an asset on their books. Okay, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. That United States embraces multipolar integrations, but at the same time so I think that's a very, very strong signal to everybody in the region that the security architecture is being overhauled. China has pretty much designated Iran as the region's anchor of the new security architecture. And so now people, and then another important moment was the West freezing Russia's assets in Western banks. And so many of these oil exporting countries have hundreds of billions of dollars sitting in European and American banks at the Federal Reserve and in London and in Europe. And they now realize that that money is not their money. This could be frozen and taken away from that. If they can do it to Russia, of course they can do it to UAE. They can always invent some kind of the United States is still the leader in certain technologies. It's also a leader in certain industries that maybe go under the radar. But I always like to point out, if you want to buy a Rolls-Royce piano, it's going to be the New York built Steinway piano, and they have things like Fender guitars, and Hollywood can still make nice films once they sober up and purge it from all these degenerates that are running it. But the United States has a lot to offer to the world, and so I think that that's going to come back. I believe that there's not going to be a war between China and the United States, and I think that so unless Trump ends up dying mysteriously while in office, and the global interest managed to regime change and bring back some autopen administration, Juan Guaido maybe becomes the next president of the United States. I think that the United States will continue to go in the direction of multipolar integrations,